Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Minted Podcast. On some of these episodes, we're going to document creators that they're doing this. They've launched their NFT projects, and we're going to share those stories. And on episodes like today, we're going to bring in thought leaders from the space where they're connected with a ton of creators, with a ton of platforms. And I think it's really valuable for us to get their perspective on what is going on in the space and what opportunities. So I'm super excited to have the mayor from NFT and Chill on the show. How are you doing today? Welcome to the Minted Podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. Super stoked to be here, and I'm having a wonderful day.
Awesome. Good to hear. So for those of our listeners that are not connected, I want to just give you a chance just to plug your own show. Tell us about NFT and Chill. How did that podcast start, and what's really the vision for the show itself?
Yeah, absolutely. So NFT and Chill is... And it started back in December of 2021. And it really just, I've been on probably, this might be my 13th podcast as a guest. And in the beginning, I was promoting a project that I was working for, Basefish Mafia. I was the community manager. And people started telling me, you should create your own podcast, which I had never done before. And so I created the podcast, and really it was just a show about just genuine information and talking about interesting topics. And the show absolutely blew up, and that was my surprise. It blew up organically and really it was because of the community. The community from the people in Basefish Mafia and the Web3 community itself. It's now one of the top most listened to podcasts in Web3. It was nominated Best NFT Media at NFT NYC in July. And it's in the top, I think, 50 in over 30 countries. And it's been heard by over 150,000 people. So
that's awesome.
And really the show is just about, talking about interesting topics with artists, creators, and thought leaders from the Web3 space.
Love it. So you're doing a lot of your life looks like podcasting, consulting, speaking. I mean, you're fully in the Web3 space. When did that transition happen out of I don't know what some might call the, traditional workforce? What was your last job that your parents would probably look at and be like, oh, this is a normal job?
Yeah. So in Web 2, I was, social media management, marketing on the e-commerce side. Cool. So that was probably about almost 3 years ago, but it was, I've been working remote for probably the last 6. So the transition into Web3 was pretty seamless. I think I went full time in 2020. So, just diving right in and just trying to learn as much about, blockchain technology, cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
That's kind of how it all started.
Do you remember, was there a moment that really the transition from Web 2 to Web 3 clicked for you? Maybe it was a project or something that you saw where you realized, oh my gosh, this Web 3 thing, the blockchain, the technology, the cryptocurrencies, the NFTs, this is the future, and this is what I want to jump into.
Yeah, definitely. So I've been trading cryptocurrency for probably over 3 years. And I would say during the meme stock, frenzy during the pandemic, the AMC and GameStop, I was very involved with that just because, what it stood for, fighting it back against the institutions and, trying to take back control and trying to beat them at their own game, because the game is rigged, at least on the investing side. Mm-hmm. And, Web3, NFTs, cryptocurrency kind of stood for, giving the power back to the consumer, back to the people. So that, I would say, that aspect of it is where I fell in love with the space.
Did you watch I know Netflix just came out with their like 3-part documentary on that. Did you get to watch that?
I haven't watched it yet, because I lived it. So
yeah.
But it's on my list for sure.
Yeah, it was good. I wasn't like as involved. I was more following it from, the outside. But yeah, I mean, one of the crazy things in there was them, talking to these hedge fund managers and realizing like I don't remember what the technology is, but there's this like platform that Bloomberg delivers out that pretty much if you have it, it gives you more up-to-date information initially before it goes to the public on where these stocks are at. And so then they can buy quicker. And in that world, like milliseconds matter. And I mean, I think it costs like $20,000 per license. And so you have these hedge fund managers, they're like, well, yeah, we have 150 licenses. And it's like, well, that's just not going to be accessible to your average person that's like sitting at home. And even the computing power to like run it. And so you really do realize like, oh man, some of these games have they have kind of been rigged for the common user that's not sitting in a hedge fund office.
Yeah, absolutely. See, most of the industries are controlled by a small group of people that are sitting in a room and they're making the decisions on, what music artists get airplay, what movies get released, and especially in the investment stocks. So, what they do is the game is definitely rigged against the majority, the retail investor, like the average person investing. And the stuff that they deploy is just insane.
Yeah.
Some of these hedge funds have, like psychiatrists and like just psychological people on to, employ like psych warfare on the retail investor because they trade on emotion.
Yeah,
they have people in Reddit groups disguised as you and me, like fudding certain stocks and trying to get people to sell or buy.
Yeah,
it's definitely a rigged game.
Yeah, it's really wild to see. And I think it's really fun to see people's like eyes light up when they realize the like possibility of the decentralized, like all of this decentralized conversation, whether it's cryptocurrency or NFTs or different things like that. It really is. It's cool when people like get it. Like, obviously it's complicated and it seems like there's a mass generalization, but the older people get, it seems like it's harder for them to necessarily like grasp the technology. But it's really awesome to see when it clicks and people realize like, oh, this provides so much more opportunity for the average like retail person.
Absolutely. It provides more ownership but also more freedom in a sense of, that you can transfer that ownership like easily with NFT technology. And, that's where we should be moving, is to a decentralized world.
Mm-hmm.
There's a reason why blockchain technology and cryptocurrency are challenging the way we do banking and really every aspect, from movies, music, art. I mean, there's a reason for that. People are waking up.
Yeah, and I think that's good transition. Like, I want to talk about content creators. For me in my journey, it was probably like August of 21 when I remember asking myself the question as like a podcaster and as somebody who owns a podcasting company of like, what would it look like for a podcast to be an NFT? And that was the wrong question. Like, that's not the answer to that question, isn't like the right thing, but like some questions lead us to questions. And so that kind of led me down the path of really getting passionate about like, man, what does this look like for content creators? What does this look like for podcasters and YouTubers? And even over the last year, realizing there's tons of shows about NFTs. There's a lot of people that are talking about the NFTs they're collecting individually. But I think for a lot of content creators, it hasn't clicked yet of like, how does this work for you and your community? Like, how does this work for you as a podcaster to launch an NFT project? What opportunities are you seeing that you're excited about, specifically for like content creators and NFTs, and how do you see like those worlds coming together? Because we were talking before we hit record, like there's not as many like active projects right now coming from content creators for their audience that people would, I guess, people would think there's a ton of them, and there's not. So what opportunities are you seeing for content creators?
Yeah, I mean, the content creator side of it is incredibly interesting because, it just speaks to what we were talking about with decentralization and giving the power to the individual, to the person who's actually creating. A content creator right now, if they are posting on TikTok or on Twitter or any of the other social platforms and they're doing very well, they are sharing that revenue and with the company that the platform they are on, like heavily. And they're also restricted from creating whatever they want, the freedom to create. So, decentralized social media platforms, there's a lot of like fake decentralization going on, people disguised and calling themselves decentralized, but we really don't have a lot of actual decentralization. There are a few very social platforms out there like Logcast. Logcast is a social media platform where creators can create content and they can turn that content immediately into sort of NFTs, and then they get all the revenue from what they're creating. I think like that is what this space can open up for content creators, to where they have 100% control, they have 100% ownership of the content that they create, and they get the lion's share of the revenue.
Yeah. I know that's different, but just kind of to play like devil's advocate, like how is that different than previous content models? And when we're looking at how, kind of the creator economy has evolved, like what are the main ways that that's different?
So you mean like on like Twitter?
Well, yeah, or even just like Facebook and YouTube and podcasts, where like a lot of the ways that creators are, it's been more platforms making money off of creators than creators making money off like from their audience and from their community. So like I'd love to just get your perspective on like the importance of this shift.
The importance of this shift is that the content creator would have 100% say in what they're putting out, and they would get all the revenue from what they put out. So like Logcast, for example, if you create a log is what they call it, and a ton of people, interact with it, they're not sharing any of the revenue with Logcast. So yeah, I mean, it takes the middleman out.
Yeah. Have there been some projects that you've been thinking about? And I mean, obviously you don't have to share anything that is not public yet, but like, what about just for your platform and for like NFT and Chill? I'm sure there's been ideas and then people have been like, oh, you got to launch your NFT. Like, do you think you're going to launch an NFT project? And what are some ideas you've had around what this looks like for you as a content creator?
Yeah, that's a great question. The show is it's just a very genuine show, and people are listening for the content that's being created, for the guests that are coming on, my insights, the guest insights, and what we're talking about. So I've never really thought about releasing an NFT project. I may release some sort of NFT with in collaboration with guest artists that have been on the show. But what that NFT is going to look like is maybe 20 or 50 copies with some sort of utility attached. And it's not going to be expensive at all. I don't know. I've always considered myself on the same plane as my listeners. Like, we're all equal. I'm learning, they're learning. I've never been one for like celebrities and influencers. That's not really kind of my thing. I don't follow people who don't follow me on Twitter. I don't engage with like Elon Musk's post because, he's not going to really notice us, for one, the average person. Mm-hmm. And, I don't know. I just never been one for the celebrity and the influencer lifestyle.
Yeah. Well, I love that authenticity, and it's probably part of the reason you've blown up, and that your show has blown up, is because I think we're just sick of like the inauthentic aspect of like what it's looked like to, market yourselves or be famous online and whatnot. And I think they want real. And I think you've presented that well. I'm curious to like, if there's some areas where your mind has changed or where you've changed your perspective on NFTs in the Web3 space since you started. Let's say just since you started NFT and Chill in December of 21, are there some areas where you've changed your mind or maybe where your perspective has shifted when looking at the NFT market?
That's a great question. And just real quick to add to the whole influencer celebrity thing, I'm not trying to be like a curmudgeon about the whole thing.
Yeah.
But, Web3 is about, supporting each other. Anybody in the world can get into this space, create and like build something for themselves. And, the only way that the average person, the everyday person can do that is by people supporting each other, communities supporting communities, artists supporting each other. Like that's how the space grows. And that's how it's different than Web 2. Mm-hmm. Now, for what you just asked, the space, it moves very quickly. This time last year, it was like a gold mine. Like mm-hmm. You minted a project, it was going to 3 or 5x no matter what. Then the space became very saturated. A lot of people got in, and there was a lot of cash grabs. There was some rugs, and people were in it for the wrong reasons. My personal opinion of NFTs and the use case and the technology hasn't changed, because I do believe this is the future. And, transfer of ownership, proof of ownership that's massive utility. Mm-hmm. Stuff like the soulbound token for like birth certificates and, university diplomas. Like that's what this space is about. And I think the space got very, people started copying each other. There was a lot of the same utility. Everybody had a game. Everybody had a DAO. Everybody had a token. Mm-hmm. And, it became...
Or everybody was trying to build a game.
Yeah.
They didn't have one, but they had the idea that they were selling.
Exactly. And it just became a space that everybody wanted to create. And there was very little consuming going on. And then the market crash came, and we realized there's a lot of the same out there. This is heavily saturated, and this space needs innovation. There's the potential for the use case of blockchain tech and NFTs is endless. Mm-hmm. So we need to start creating that next tech,
right? That
next iteration.
Yeah. What do you think it's going to take to really go mass market? And I know it's, comparative to like 2 years ago, some might say it's mass market now, but when you look at the percentage of people engaged with NFTs on a regular basis and with blockchain from the rest of the population, it's still a fraction. So like, what do you think are some changes that need to happen to really see the mass market and mass communities engage with and believe in NFTs?
Yeah, so that's a good question. If you look at like, I think it's either a sandbox or the metaverse, so don't quote me on this, but one of them, it was reported that their daily active users was 19. So
I remember hearing that. I think I I think Cuban was tweeting out about that.
Yeah, that's what the space has come to. Everybody is in here trying to create and they're trying to build, which is incredible. But there's not a ton of consuming, like I just mentioned. If the space is 95% founders and creators, nobody's gonna. It can't succeed.
Right.
So we definitely need more people coming in. We need mass adoption. We need education. But the best way to get people into Web3 is if they don't know they're in Web3. Especially like I mentioned NFT voting. 99% of the people who go to the polls and vote by NFT won't know they're in Web3. That's kind of what, we have to figure out how to get all, the rest of the world in the space. Mm-hmm. How can we do it without them knowing that they're in it? Because you don't need to be tech. You don't need to know coding. You don't need to be a huge tech person to be in this space. I mean, I'm an example of that. I can't code. Mm-hmm. I'm a very front end person.
Right. Yeah, I am as well. And that's why I think this show is sponsored by Uncut. We've talked about Uncut individually. And I think that's where some tools like that really play in well, where sure, you're still engaging with an email address, which I know traditionalists in the decentralized world, maybe that's an obstacle for them. But on the front end, I need to be able to sell NFTs to my mom. I need to be able to say hey, for this podcast episode, we're minting this NFT and you get this value, or even as simple as if you just want to support me as a creator, go and buy this NFT and it be simple. And so, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see some of the as you go deeper, there's just different layers of tools to engage. And so I think that we really, really need some platforms and tools on the front end that are going to make the barrier of entry a lot easier for people that are well, I don't know coding. I don't know what a wallet is, all of that stuff. And so it's going to be interesting to see how those tools kind of begin to interact.
Yeah. And you know what? Incentivization is a very good tool as well. And if you just take it in steps, there was a company that I had on NFT and Chill, Co-Write. They are a record label for Web3 music. And, they do a lot in Web2. The majority of their fan base and people they deal with are Web2 based. So the way that they're kind of onboarding people into Web3 is they give them an extra step. You can do all these things with this artist, but if you create this wallet, you'll get a little something extra. Things like that, incentivization, but doing it slowly. Mm-hmm. We just have to figure it out. I think everybody's responsibility is education and onboarding. Every project, every company, and these huge brands that are coming in definitely have that responsibility as well. That's just the way I see it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Kind of just big picture, over the next year or two in the near future, what are some things that you are particularly excited about when it comes to the NFT space?
Yeah, so I had the CEO of Pinata on NFT and Chill a couple weeks ago, and we talked about the future of NFTs. And he, because the way I do my podcast is, this might surprise some people, but I don't think about, write down, or any of the questions beforehand. I don't give the guests questions. I don't even tell them what we're talking about. Literally, we get on, I hit record, and then I start thinking about the episode and the questions.
Love it.
And it's completely organic and it's very spontaneous. So I had learned in real time during the episode about this, new use case for NFTs and what quite possibly could lead to mass adoption, could be the next iteration in the space. And he was talking about NFTs as apps.
Hmm.
So, a project or a company would create an app NFT, and it could be sold anywhere where NFTs are sold on marketplaces. So I think app NFTs is just such an incredible, idea, because everybody uses apps. Apps have taken over the landscape because the space moves very quickly. People's attention spans are short. If they can have it at like hand reach, they're going to use it. So that was an exciting thing, and I'm kind of excited about that for sure.
So would that look like an app on your phone that you'd like access through an NFT? Like explain like kind of more of the details of like how something like that would work.
So yeah, it would be an app on your phone, or like, your desktop can have apps now as well. So yeah, it would be those kind of apps, but it would be on the blockchain. The information, it would be on IPFS. Like, it would be an app, but it would also be an NFT.
Yeah. Well, and the interesting thing about that, and one of the use cases I've felt like will play out, is like the piracy piece of like, I think piracy is going to be way harder. Which some of us are probably like, oh man, that sucks. I really like 15 people in my family having our login to Netflix. Yeah. Or, the different things like that, or, even for like software for my team, like, okay, cool. I'll be honest and say there's definitely some softwares that we use where it's like everybody's using my login, so I don't have to pay for 5 licenses. I think things like that and access to apps being on the blockchain, it's going to be more authenticated, which might hurt a little bit if we like have that authentication. But I think in the long run, it's good for everybody. Like, it's good for everybody for like access and user information to be authenticated, rather than us just being able to like ship out information and kind of this like pirating place. I think pirates are always going to figure out a way to do some stuff, but I think like when we look at access to technology being authenticated, like I think that will be really good for the industry as a whole.
Yeah, it definitely will. But on the flip side of that, if you don't use, because I have an app on my phone that I bought 6 years ago for like $3, but I don't use it anymore. So if I had an app that was an NFT, I could resell that. So
yeah, that's interesting.
On the flip side, you'd be able to transfer ownership. You'd be able to resell an app. And, you also about the future, I'm definitely excited for the gaming industry to get into Web3, to get into NFTs because of that, same sentiment. If I buy a digital copy of a game, I should be able to resell it. I should be able to transfer it to somebody. Yeah. You can't do that right now. You can't do that with accessories of games. And I think that's an incredible use case. But, we just saw Sega. They're developing their first blockchain game, and that's one of the first major like AAA studios to do that. So I'm excited for that as well.
Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah, there's so much to be excited about. There's plenty of ideas. We joked about all the projects that are, that a year ago said we're building a game, and like it's like, well, there's not even the game. The game's not even here yet. There's not even like a beta or anything. So there's plenty of ideas in the space. It's going to be fun to have, fun to be able to see what really comes to fruition. And I feel like, I encourage all of our listeners, go check out NFT and Chill, because it sounds like you're going to kind of be, sharing some of the things that as they are coming to fruition and as they are coming actually out of that idea mode. As we kind of bring this to a close, what are just, are there some, you mentioned Pinata, are there any, whether it's projects or people, like what are you following in the space that like what are you excited and like on a weekly or daily basis, where are you going that you're like, man, I'm really excited about what these people or what these groups are doing in the Web3 space?
Yeah. Honestly, I like to follow grassroots people, like the people that are out there building and creating, and they need people's support to to get bigger. There is some really cool stuff on Tezos happening right now with actual art. There's an artist called Niran Art, and she makes really cool stuff. She has like a Halloween thing going on right now. So like following stuff like that, and like Dan Williams art on Tezos. There's the Wag Me Wine project, which is a cool Tezos art project that has like real world wine tied in. Of course, Base Fish Mafia. It's one of the few projects that are still very active. The founder is very active, and the community has been, kind of rallied. So, stuff like that, I think, is worthwhile for sure.
Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, I encourage our listeners, definitely check that out. In the show notes below, you'll find a link to NFT and Chill. And Mr. Mayer, so glad you could come on the Minted Podcast. Really appreciate your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And real quick, if anybody is going to be in Miami for Art Basel, I will be a speaker at DecentralCon Miami, as well as the first U.S. Women's Web3 Summit. So awesome. I'd love to connect with anybody who's going to those events.
Cool. Great. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. Great to know. And you're on the speaker circuit. So I'm encouraging any of our listeners to just kind of stay in touch with you on Twitter to see where you're going to be at. So thanks again for joining.
Thank you, Seth. This has been awesome.
Cool.